why don't you just take us through the process of what you know in terms of the security aspect of what happens when a voter casts their ballot?
If Americans were given the opportunity to cast all their ballots on paper, they'd go, I cast a paper ballot. But if all of those ballots were then taken to a room where the great and magical Oz came out and said, yes, bring me all your ballots, and then closed the door, and then an hour later opened the door and posted the results and said, there's the results of the vote, and closed the door again, who would believe them? Nobody. It's just the only person who ever saw all the ballots or ever counted them or ever did anything is the great and magical Oz. That's what is happening with these electronic tabulators. All these voting machines, let's assume all the voting machines work perfectly, which they don't, but let's assume they all did. Then all this data gets sent to this black box that no county commissioner I've ever met understands what happens, no audit person I've ever met has ever looked at them, and they all call the specialist from Diebold or the specialist from ES&S to set the machine. It's never been inspected by anybody. It's a black box. So you send all the votes into this black box and out comes the result. And everyone goes, well, that's the result. Okay, what happened to the code? What happened to the process? What is the tabulation code that's in there? I mean, this is what we do for a living, is we audit those processes for banks, for insurance companies. And if a bank walked up to me and said, Spoon, we want you to come and audit our entire banking system and make sure that there's no fraud in the thing, but we're not going to let you look at the code, I'd go, then how do I audit it? That's basically what they're saying with these voting machines. So we looked at the process, and they won't let anyone look at the code. It's like, trust us, it's going into that box and being counted correctly. I don't believe it.
So even if the voting was secure.
Let's assume the voting is secure, which there's ways to hack that. But
what you're
that's
saying
not the big problem. The problem is these tabulators that are just magic rooms. Everyone carries your ballot and hands them to Oz, and then Oz reports to you what the result is with no accountability at all.
Now, there are 4 companies that currently produce these tabulators that are used.
Correct. The 2 that are the most, that seem, and we haven't looked at everything in detail. I've spent enough time doing homework now about the way Diebold is doing it. And partly it's because my home state of Ohio is deploying these Diebold machines. So I actually met the young kid, great guy, very nice. I went and met with my county elections commissioner who told me, oh, it's perfectly safe, and gave me a nice 3-page promotional handout about the security of the machines from Diebold. I said, I'm not interested in the machine, I'm interested in the tabulator. And she said, what's the tabulator? I said, well, where? And she goes, oh, the computer where all the machines report to. I go, yes. And I said, who looks at the GEMS code? Who does the interface? Who actually has inspected the machine compiling? How is that set? And she goes, well, Diebold does it. I said, okay, can I talk to somebody from Diebold? That went back and forth for a while, and eventually, the third time I went back and saw them, the Diebold specialist was there. Great kid, very nice, had just been hired away from HP where he had installed printers. So I said to him, super, I said, is there something I can look at in terms of the machine code compiling? He goes, oh, I don't know how to do that. I said, who sets the GEMS interface? He goes, I don't know anything about that. This is the person that they turn to who shows up with a thumbstick and puts it in the machine to set the vote for them. He doesn't know how it works either.
So nobody knows how it works.
Oh, someone knows how it works. So eventually, in my own personal quest, I ended up getting to talk to a gentleman, and we'll give you all of his data. You're welcome to follow up with him, from Diebold, who it turns out doesn't actually work for Diebold. He works for Public Strategies Incorporated, a crisis communication management firm that if your company is in crisis or under attack, we will communicate with your public your message. This guy represented himself as being from Diebold. I saw him actually on the news several times from Diebold, but he's not from Diebold. Nor, when I began asking him any kind of real questions, could he answer them. So eventually he referred me to somebody else at Diebold. So in this process, I've continuously met people from Diebold, but none of them, A, are programmers, B, understand what I'm asking, or C, are willing to give us any kind of access to the people who would understand what we're asking.